Clara Bennett was a ghost in the halls of Rosewood Music Academy. Every morning before the first note was played, she would arrive in her simple gray uniform, a silent guardian of the sacred space. She was the janitor, the one who swept the floors and dusted the grand pianos, ensuring every classroom was pristine before the symphony of the day began. To most, she was just part of the scenery, a quiet presence that blended into the background. The teachers, wrapped up in their world of recitals and promising students, would offer a polite nod if they noticed her at all. Some were kind, but to others, she was as inanimate as the furniture she polished. But Clara didn't seem to mind. She moved with a calm patience, a gentle smile gracing her lips even when no one was there to see it. She loved the music that seeped through the walls, the soaring violin solos, the powerful piano chords, the ethereal voices of the choir. Though she was an outsider to this world, the music spoke to a part of her soul she kept hidden away. Sometimes when she found herself alone in an empty practice room, she'd let her fingers drift over the piano keys, a fleeting, tender touch, just to feel their familiar coolness again, a memory of a life she'd left behind. You see, no one at the academy knew that this quiet janitor was once a gifted pianist. In her youth, Clara had dreamed of concert halls and standing ovations, of elegant gowns and her name in lights. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Her father's illness forced her to set aside her ambitions, one sacrifice leading to another, until her dream became a distant echo. She never spoke of it, never complained. Instead, she found solace in the simple things: the smell of fresh polish, the stillness of the mornings, the way sunlight danced across the ivory keys. One afternoon, Clara was cleaning near the main hall where the teachers were holding a meeting. They were gathered around the grand piano, their faces etched with frustration. The topic was the upcoming recital, and a piece that was stumping even their most talented students: Rachmaninoff's notoriously difficult prelude in G minor. "It's hopeless," sighed Mr. Thompson, a senior teacher. "Even my best student can't get through it without a dozen mistakes." Ms. Rogers, a teacher known for her sharp tongue, added, "It's a beast. You need more than just practice, you need real, raw talent." As they lamented, Clara mopped the floor behind them, the melody they spoke of awakening a flood of memories. She remembered the long nights, the aching fingers, the sheer elation of finally conquering that very piece. Just then, a younger teacher, Mr. Lee, noticed her and with a joking smile called out, "Hey, Clara, you hear that? Maybe you should give it a try. You might play it better than our students." A ripple of light-hearted laughter went through the group. It wasn't meant to be cruel, just an amusing thought. The janitor playing Rachmaninoff. Clara froze, her hand tightening on the mop. She offered a small, polite smile. "Oh, no, sir," she said softly. "That's far too difficult for me." But they weren't ready to let the joke go. "Come on, Clara," Mr. Thompson chuckled. "Just a few notes. Let's hear what a normal person sounds like trying to play it." The laughter grew, tinged with an unconscious arrogance, the kind that assumes knowledge and status are one and the same. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to vanish, but then a flicker from deep within her, a spark of the person she used to be, ignited. She looked at the grand piano, its polished surface gleaming under the lights. It felt like looking into a mirror that reflected not the janitor in the gray uniform, but the passionate young artist she once was. "Are you sure?" Mr. Lee teased gently. "We promise we won't laugh." Clara took a slow, steadying breath. "All right," she whispered. The room fell into an expectant hush. The teachers exchanged surprised glances and stepped aside, making a path for her. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the piano. Her soft-soled shoes were the only sound in the vast hall. She sat down, her posture perfect, her fingers hovering over the keys. For a long moment she simply sat with her eyes closed, breathing in the familiar scent of wood, polish, and time. Her fingers trembled, but it wasn't from fear. It was anticipation. The teachers leaned in whispering, expecting a few clumsy, discordant notes. They had no idea Inside Clara's mind, a lifetime of music rushed forward. Her first recital, her father's proud smile, the feeling of notes flowing through her like electricity. She whispered to herself, "Let's see if I still remember." As her fingers finally descended, a strange, powerful calm settled over her. The piano, her oldest and most faithful friend, was waiting. The quiet woman they had just laughed at was about to show them what music truly was. Clara's fingers hovered just above the piano keys. The room was utterly still, save for the faint ticking of the wall clock. The teachers waited, their faces filled with amusement. Her heart pounded in her chest, a slow, heavy drumbeat. It had been years since she sat at a piano like this, not since her father passed away. Music used to be her entire world. She'd play for hours, lost in the melodies. But when her father got sick, everything changed. She sold her own piano to afford his medicine, and after he was gone, the silence was too much to bear. She never touched the keys again. Now, facing this grand instrument, she felt a paralyzing mix of fear and longing. Her hands remembered the feel of every key, but her mind screamed with doubt. What if she'd forgotten? What if they laughed at her? To them, this was just a harmless joke. Mr. Lee leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. "Go on, Clara," he said. "Just give it a try. No pressure." But the pressure was immense, a weight of buried emotions and forgotten dreams. Clara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She whispered silently, "Just one more time. For him." In her memory, her father's voice echoed, "Music isn't in your fingers, Clara. It's in your heart. Play what you feel." She gently placed her fingers on the keys. The cool ivory felt like an old friend. Her right hand trembled for a moment, then stilled. The first note she played was soft, almost a whisper. It wasn't the complex piece they expected. It was a simple, personal melody, one her father used to hum. The sound filled the room, a memory brought to life. The teacher's whispers and laughter died down. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected anything meaningful. Clara opened her eyes, her breathing steady. The fear was melting away, replaced by a profound sense of peace. She nodded to herself, a silent promise made. "All right," she murmured. "Let's see if I still remember Rachmaninoff." And then, she began. The first few notes were fragile, like a bird relearning to fly, but within seconds her fingers found their rhythm, moving with growing confidence. The sound swelled, becoming richer, more powerful. The melody that had stumped even the most experienced teachers began to pour effortlessly through the hall. Every teacher was frozen in place. The woman they had teased, the quiet janitor they thought knew nothing of music, was performing one of the most difficult piano pieces. Flawlessly. Her posture was elegant, her touch filled with a lifetime of emotion. Her hands glided across the keys like water over smooth stones. As she played, the classroom disappeared. Clara was back in her father's sunlit living room, young and full of dreams, his voice guiding her. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't stop. Her fingers danced faster, stronger, freer. The teachers were no longer smiling. They were utterly mesmerized. Ms. Rogers, known for her strict demeanor, covered her mouth in disbelief. Mr. Thompson leaned forward, his eyes wide, trying to follow the impossible speed of her fingers. Mr. Lee, the one who started it all, felt a lump form in his throat. He wasn't just hearing music, he was witnessing a soul laid bare. As the piece reached its thundering climax, Clara was transformed. The quiet janitor was gone. In her place stood a true artist, fierce, graceful, and completely lost in her world. The final note rang out, strong and clear, hanging in the sudden absolute silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Clara's hands dropped slowly to her lap. She looked down, her breathing heavy, her eyes wet but peaceful. Finally, she looked up at the stunned faces before her. She smiled gently and said, "It's been a long time since I played." No one laughed. They simply stared, overwhelmed. They saw her now, not as a janitor, but as a master. Mr. Lee was the first to speak, his voice trembling. Clara, how? How did you learn to play like that? She gave a small humble shrug. I used to play, she said softly, before life got busy. And with that she stood, quietly returning to her mop and bucket as if nothing had happened, leaving them to grapple with the extraordinary moment they had just witnessed. That night, long after everyone had gone home, Clara returned to the piano. She played again, just for herself. And the melody that flowed through the empty halls was soft and beautiful, like a whisper from the past, telling her she had finally come home. The room fell silent, yet it felt intensely alive. The air crackled with a strange energy, a mixture of shock, awe, and disbelief. The teachers stood frozen, their eyes fixed on Clara. Just moments ago, they had seen her as a simple janitor, someone to be overlooked. Now words failed them. Clara sat quietly at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys. Her breathing was calm, her gaze lowered, as if waking from a long, beautiful dream. The final, powerful note she played still echoed faintly in the hall, a lingering ghost of something magnificent. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The grand piano stood like a silent witness to a sacred event. Mr. Lee. His voice, barely a whisper, was the first to break the spell. He took a hesitant step forward. Clara, that was incredible. How did you do that? Clara offered a small, kind smile. It's been a long time, she said softly. I used to play. Those 3 words hung in the air, a secret finally set free. Ms. Rogers blinked, her usual composure gone. Used to play? She repeated, her voice laced with astonishment. Clara, that wasn't just playing, that was perfection. You played Rachmaninoff like it was a nursery rhyme. Clara looked down at her hands, the same hands that had scrubbed floors and polished desks for years. They were calloused and strong from work, yet they moved with such gentle grace on the piano keys. When I was young, she began, her voice a blend of old sadness and newfound peace. I studied music. I dreamed of performing on the world's biggest stages. But life doesn't always follow the script. She wasn't complaining. She was simply remembering a path not taken. Mr. Thompson, the senior music teacher with 30 years of experience, stepped closer. Clara, he said quietly, his tone full of respect. You played like a professional who has lived every note of that piece. That's not something you can fake. Clara smiled faintly, placing a hand over her heart. Music never really leaves you, she said. Even when you stop playing, it stays right here. The teachers exchanged humbled glances. They suddenly felt small, not because Clara had embarrassed them, but because they had been so profoundly wrong. They had judged a masterpiece by its cover, a brilliant artist by her uniform. Mr. Lee rubbed the back of his neck, shamefaced. I'm sorry, Clara, he said honestly. We shouldn't have made fun of you. We didn't mean to. Clara interrupted him gently. It's all right, she said. You didn't know. Sometimes people don't see what's beneath the surface, and that's okay. Her calm forgiveness only deepened their humility. Then, something magical happened. Ms. Rogers, known for her strictness, walked over and placed a hand gently on Clara's shoulder. Would you play again? She asked, her voice soft. Please, just one more piece. Clara hesitated, then nodded. This time she chose a soft, emotional melody of her own, a piece she had written years ago when her father was still alive. As her fingers danced across the keys, the notes flowed like tender whispers of love, loss, and sacrifice. The melody wrapped around the teachers, stirring emotions they hadn't felt in years. When the final note faded, the silence that followed was deep and reverent. No one clapped. Applause felt too small for such a moment. Clara slowly stood, gave a small bow, and whispered, "Thank you for listening." Then she turned back to her mop and bucket as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for the teachers, everything had changed. The next day, whispers of the janitor who played like a master filled the academy halls. Clara simply smiled and continued her work, the music in her heart more than enough. That evening, in the quiet, moonlit hall, she sat at the piano once more. Playing softly just for herself, her melody filled the silence like a prayer, and as the final note faded, she smiled, a deep, peaceful smile, knowing that her true self had finally come home. The next morning, sunlight streamed into Rosewood Music Academy, painting golden stripes across the piano Clara had played. The notes she'd poured her heart into seemed to linger in the air, a soft, beautiful echo. When Clara arrived for her shift, the world felt different. The usual noisy hallways were hushed. As she walked, heads turned, but not with the usual indifference. Now there was curiosity, a hint of awe. Whispers followed her. "That's her," a student murmured. "The janitor who played Rachmaninoff. Perfectly." Another chimed in. "Mr. Thompson said she played like a professional, even better than most performers." Clara offered a small, private smile but kept walking. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. The night before had been for her alone, a secret conversation between her soul and the music she had long since buried. But it seemed her secret was out. Later that morning, the academy's principal, Mr. Douglas, summoned her to his office. She walked in to find all the music teachers gathered, the very same ones who had once laughed. Now their faces were filled with a shy warmth. "Clara," Mr. Douglas began, his voice kind, "we owe you an apology and our deepest respect. I'm amazed. We had no idea such incredible talent was right here among us." Clara looked down, a blush creeping up her cheeks. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. "I was just playing for myself. It wasn't anything important." Mr. Douglas smiled. "It was important, Clara. More than you know. You reminded everyone here what true music is. Not just notes and rhythm, but emotion, life, and heart." The teachers all nodded. Even Ms. Rogers, who had been so cold before, stepped forward, her eyes soft. "Clara," she said, "I've been teaching for 25 years and I've never heard anyone play with such soul. You didn't just play the notes, you told a story." Clara smiled modestly. "Music always tells a story," she replied. "We just have to listen." Then Mr. Lee spoke up, his voice filled with hope. "Clara, we were thinking, would you be willing to perform at our upcoming recital? The students would learn so much from you." Clara froze. "Perform? In front of everyone?" "Me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," he said earnestly. "Not as a janitor, as a pianist. As someone who understands music better than any of us." For a long moment she was silent. Fear battled with the small, courageous spark that had been reignited the night before. Finally, that spark won. She nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "I'll play." The day of the recital arrived, and the auditorium was packed. Students, parents, teachers, even townspeople who had heard the whispers about the mysterious janitor pianist. When Clara walked onto the stage in a simple blue dress, a hush fell over the crowd. She looked like an ordinary woman, but the moment her fingers touched the keys, everything changed. The first note was pure, floating through the air. Then another, and another, until a breathtaking melody filled every corner of the hall. Her hands moved with a grace that came from a lifetime of love and loss. People forgot to breathe. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others wept silently, moved by the raw honesty in every chord. It wasn't about perfection, it was about truth. When the final note faded into a powerful silence, the audience exploded. They rose to their feet in a wave of thunderous applause. Clara stood, a little shy, her eyes shining with tears. She bowed gently and whispered, "Thank you." After that day, everything was different. The academy asked her to teach a special class, not on technique, but on feeling the music. The students adored her for her talent, her kindness, and her humility. She kept her janitor job, saying it kept her grounded. Whenever new students arrived, the teachers would point to her and say, "See that woman? She taught us the greatest lesson of all. Never underestimate anyone." And sometimes late at night when the halls were empty and quiet, Clara would sit at the grand piano. She would close her eyes and play softly, not for an audience, but for herself, for her father, for the love of music that had always been there, waiting patiently to be heard again.